Hey there. Tonight, let's step quietly into the hush before dawn, where the secrets of ancient Egypt still cling to every grain of wind-blown sand. Imagine this. Beneath the pale waking sky, I'm standing at the edge of the Giza Plateau, boots already coated with the fine, stubborn dust that's drifted here for thousands of years, settling deep into the lines and seams of the world's most enigmatic monument, the Great Pyramid. The air is chilled and tinged with the metallic scent of anticipation. Even now, there is unease in the silent way the pyramid's colossal shadow stretches toward me, sharp-edged against the lightning sky. Most people think they know its story, but as I trace the geometric lines that seem simple from afar, there is far more here than the myth of a tomb for a mighty pharaoh. And before this night is through, I'll reveal something that could change what you've always believed about who built this monument and why. If you find yourself drawn into these late-night journeys, stories that tug at forgotten corners of history, then feel free to stick around and join the adventure again. If not, no pressure. This is for explorers at heart. I would love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time glows on your clock right now? Each of us is connected in this nighttime circle, our curiosity crossing continents and time zones. For now, just dim your lights, settle back into your bed or your favorite corner, and let the relentless pace of the outside world slip away. We're about to wander into places most travelers never see, a landscape both dazzling with sunlight above and haunted by shadows below. The sky hovers silver blue as I step off the asphalt and onto grit, boots sinking into the ancient dust of the Giza Plateau. Each breath carries the cold hush of dawn and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. Sand rasps against my legs, whispering across the stone foundations, timeless, indifferent, and unyielding. In the half-light, the pyramid's silhouette commands the horizon, impossibly geometric, each weathered plane cutting the morning haze with an unnatural precision. Silence presses in as I fix my gaze upward. What have these stones seen? What do they truly conceal? I am an outsider, guided only by an aching curiosity and the weight of every question the guides refuse to answer. The journey begins here, beneath a burning sky and in the shifting sands that have buried, revealed, and resisted the answers for millennia. There is a feeling you get, standing in the pyramid's shadow, that history is looking back at you. The official story, the one repeated on every tour, graven into bronze plaques and textbooks, starts simply. 4,500 years ago, they say, under the brilliant reign of Pharaoh Khufu, 100,000 workers toiled ceaselessly through the heat and the dust, lifting stone blocks twice the weight of a car, stacking them with mathematical perfection, until the world's greatest tomb stood impervious against the desert winds. The timeline is clear, the purpose stated, a monument to a king raised around 2550 BC. But I can't shake the sense that something isn't quite right with this narrative. Because if you listen closely, truly listen, there are questions that echo louder than any guide's polished speech. First, there is the raw, overwhelming scale. These stones are not mere blocks, they are monoliths of extreme precision. Walking alongside the base, my fingers brush lines so straight, so deliberate, that you could believe the stone itself was cut by intention rather than crude chisels. The seams between blocks are impossibly thin, in some places nearly lightless, as if the air itself cannot intrude. How did workers wielding copper tools unlock this level of accuracy? In the silence, another detail gnaws at my thoughts. The absence of smoke stains or soot on ceiling stones deep within the interior chambers. Most ancient tombs, indeed, nearly every underground site in the old world, bear the signature leftovers of fire or oil, blackened vaults, greasy residue, the unmistakable shadow of ancient light. Here, however, the passages are cool and clean, as if untouched by flame. No matter how many times I examine the stonework, slide my flashlight over the carved walls, I never find a trace. This alone quietly challenges the accepted story, casting doubt on the notion that laborers lit these halls with flaming torches or simple lamps. In a place so labyrinthine, so airless and dark, how was such flawless construction achieved without the crude light that scars all other tombs? A gust of wind surges, swirling up sand and settling it again in restless waves against my boots. It is as though the desert itself is a guardian, smothering every answer as soon as the question forms. I close my eyes, letting the cool wind settle on my face, and picture the world as it might have been. This plateau ringed by water, as some believe, a green Nile inexorably rising, workers or something else moving silently under the command of knowledge now lost. For a moment, the laughter of tourists, the metallic chatter of souvenir sellers, vanishes. All I hear is the ancient hush, shifting, echoing, and relentless. Then, pattern break. As I round the north base, a voice carries, flat and unmistakable. Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's indomitable guardian of antiquities, is briefing a foreign team by the fence line. His presence is imposing, his words absolute. This is the man who has shaped and fiercely protected Egypt's story for decades. No unauthorized eyes in the deep tunnels, no hasty digs in forbidden sand, no interviews with anyone who risks too much speculation. Watching him, I realize that the gatekeepers of history are as much a part of this enigma as the stones themselves. The official version is everywhere, tightly guarded, yet those with curiosity are always searching for what lies beneath. I slip away from the crowd and kneel by a half-buried shard of granite, tracing the direction of a corridor that leads not to any pharaoh's sarcophagus, but into the cold, unwelcoming dark. What drew those ancient builders to create corridors so deep, so aligned, that even today their purposes evade easy description? The air here is cooler, the hush more profound, as if the passage itself anticipates discovery. Some believe, and not without reason, that these tunnels and chambers hint at purpose beyond the prosaic, some grand technological or esoteric knowledge now erased by wind and time. If the accepted timeline, the one that speaks of sweat and simple tools, is incomplete, then what else might we be missing? I remember hearing the theory that the Sphinx once looked nothing like the serene pharaoh's head we see today, but instead, its original face may have been that of a lion, eroded and recarved across the ages. If the monuments themselves have changed shape, how much more of their history is mutable, secret, and elusive? A flash of memory, a quick cut through time, brings me to an image of night fires glinting on the horizon, of distant voices debating whether all this might have stood before the Egypt we know, built by hands as skilled, or perhaps stranger than any the textbooks allow. The dust unsettles again, and with it, a new possibility rises. Might an advanced culture, far older than Khufu, have left these enigmatic blueprints in stone, waiting for some future visitor to understand? I rise and follow the drawn line of foundation blocks, each stone a silent threat to everything I thought I knew. Every few feet there is something out of place, a strange channel, a groove that aligns only with the stars, or passages running hidden beneath my feet, still unexplored but sensed in the hush between heartbeats. The journey through Giza is a journey through unresolved contradiction, where every answer creates only more unsettling questions. With each step, the sand thickens, the silence grows, and the shadows around the pyramid press in, like the promise of revelation. Above me, the bulk of the monument stands mute, geometric, timeless, its secrets preserved for those willing to listen more closely than the rest, to wander after every sanctioned tour guide has closed his book and looked away. But as the dawn spreads wider, a new thread of the story appears, a tale told with careful authority by guides, drawing a line in the sand between what we are meant to know and what lies beneath. The guide's voice echoes with authority as he unrolls the sanctioned narrative. 4,450 years ago, the Great Pyramid of Giza rose from the desert as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu, built by a legion of workers in just 2 decades. The guide's finger traces the outline of the familiar cartouche on scorched limestone, his words reverberating in the late afternoon hush. Khufu, they tell us, was the hand behind this mountain of stone, roughly 50 monumental centuries ago. The official line clings to certainty, a story I'd been fed since childhood, the one scrawled on every plaque across Cairo, that this was a tomb, that a single pharaoh's ambitions summoned over 2 million stone blocks from the desert's edge and set them here in a feat of relentless human willpower. As the group shuffles onward, sand eddies swirling around their boots, I linger at the edge and let my eyes drift beyond the prescribed narrative, listening more closely to the silences than to the practiced script. It is not just the pyramid that stands before me, impossibly precise and unyielding. It is the weight of history and the invisible architecture of control around it. Who gets to decide what we see? And more importantly, what we aren't permitted to see? A gust sends a veil of grit whispering down my collar, sharp and cooling in the intensity of the sun. In the background, the Giza plateau seems to pulse with a quiet defiance. The ground hums softly beneath my feet, almost as if there is something alive, something still breathing, beneath the layers of stone and official stories. The sanctioned version, the one delivered with such confidence by every guide and textbook, would have us believe. The Great Pyramid of Giza is approaching 5,000 years old, born at the hands of a laboring multitude as a tomb for the ruling god, King Khufu, around 250 years before the current era. But what if that certainty is an illusion? Even now, in the smoldering heat, The air seems thick with the possibility that we are missing something essential. Move a few steps beyond the echo chamber of tourist groups, and the illusion begins to crack. I slip away from the guide and press my palm against one of the weathered blocks, the stone cool and impossibly smooth even after millennia. The silence here is not absence. It breathes with an intensity more profound than noise. Under my fingers, the scale of this thing, its cold precision, feels almost non-human. It's difficult not to sense that I am brushing more than just stone, but the boundary of understanding itself. At the northern base, the sand collects in tiny drifts at the edges of the last monumental blocks. These blocks dwarf the average person, some weighing as much as 50 tons, each positioned with razor accuracy, so tight you cannot slip a credit card between them. The friction of my skin on the weathered limestone raises a prickling at the back of my neck. How did they achieve this exactly? Every mainstream explanation insists on copper chisels, wooden sledges, ropes, and the iron resolve of human labor. But standing this close, with the desert wind whispering around my ankles, that answer feels as distant and pale as the fading afternoon light. Then, as the clockwork movements of the tour ahead recede into the background, another story takes shape, one you won't find on the museum placards. The closer I look, the more evident the contradictions become. Take the nearby Sphinx, for instance. Its weathered flanks bear the telltale undulations of water erosion, the kind shaped not by centuries, but by thousands upon thousands of years of heavy rain. Geologists, looking closely, suggest the last time such rainfall swept across this plateau was some 12 millennia ago, a gap so wide it slices straight through the agreed-upon timeline. If the Sphinx was exposed to deep antiquity's monsoon, what does that say about the civilization that carved it? Just as these questions begin to settle, a fresh gust scatters sand across the stones, scraping and hissing in the crevices. The effect is like a reset, forcing my attention to the layers of earth beneath my feet, and to the growing suspicion that the accepted tale is only a surface layer. I remember hearing about modern experiments, well-funded, carefully staged attempts to recreate the ancient builders' methods, using nothing but copper chisels, the tools that official doctrine claims built these wonders. Time and again, these experiments fail. The copper chisels buckle, blunted after only a handful of strokes against granite. The stone wins every time. What, then, are we missing? This puzzle glints at me in the afternoon sun like the facet of a half-buried artifact. A sudden pause at the periphery. My eyes snag on an out-of-place groove carved with uncanny exactness into a block near the ascending passage. Years ago, engineer Christopher Dunn reported finding drill cores so perfectly round in the basalt and granite that it seemed less the work of hand tools and more like the product of some advanced technology long vanished. This claim still rings in the air, tension humming between the stones and the official scripts. Are we staring in the face of an ability we still cannot match today? Around me, the tour has vanished, leaving only the mournful moan of wind wrapping around these titanic forms, and the distant call of a bird over the plateau. I kneel, running my palm along a patch where block meets block, the joint so seamless it feels like glass, colder than the breath of the underworld. It's here, amidst the stones and sand and gathering shadows, that the boundaries of knowledge and control pulse more vividly than anywhere else. I can almost feel the weight of all the questions that aren't allowed, the evidence gathered by open-minded geologists who dared to wonder if the monuments might be vastly older than we think. Robert Schoch and John Anthony West, outsiders to the official parade, followed the water's path on the Sphinx and saw something different in its eroded body, a silent witness from another epoch entirely. As the sun slips toward the horizon and the world turns golden, I sense a rising urgency behind the silence. What if the Great Pyramid is not just a tomb, nor even just a monument, but something far stranger? Was there once a civilization on this earth, unknown, misunderstood, banished by the keepers of history, that left its traces beneath our feet before the desert claimed it? I listen, heart pounding, to the stone's story, half told and riddled with erasures, and wonder what truths lie entombed along with the pharaohs. Who, truly, authored this colossal enigma? Who possesses the courage or the power to pry back the sand and name what sleeps below? Stepping into the Great Pyramid, the world narrows to a sand-chilled corridor and the occasional clang of my own boots on stone. From the moment I stepped across the yawning entrance of the Great Pyramid, the world I knew seemed to vanish behind a wall of crushing stone. The air sharpened, tasting like ancient dust and faint buried minerals. With every step, the rumble of my boots faded under the vast silence pressed heavy around me. Shadows spilled across the limestone corridor, flickering with the beam of my headlamp, and the only movement was the restless drift of airborne sand, always searching for a place to settle. I remember halting, just to listen. Silence, absolute and unyielding, except for the low, reluctant echo of my own breath. They say Khufu built this, the greatest of all pyramids. Yet, as I pressed deeper, expecting to find glittering hieroglyphs or triumphant murals, I found none. Here, the walls refused to speak. Not a single decorative carving hinted at a pharaoh's majesty. No painted gods, no festival processions. Just the bare, chill embrace of stone meeting stone. Every surface conspiring to erase all memory of the men who moved them. It was as if someone had gone to great lengths, not to record, but to hide. Sweeping my palm along one impossibly smooth block, I felt the cold certainty of intent, hundreds of them, lined with a precision that felt almost mechanical. There, a faded red mark lingered along one joint. I reached for it, wondering if this was finally a clue. But some argue the crude signs were left by workers, marks scrawled in haste, uncovered only after centuries of trespass. They told me nothing about Khufu, only how little we actually know. The pyramid's heart remained mute and impenetrable. And yet, the deeper I ventured, passing through narrow passageways no wider than my shoulders and colder than any tomb, a persistent apprehension grew. Where was Khufu? This was supposed to be his eternal house. But there are no remains here. Not a scrap of bone, not a trace of a king at rest. The so-called burial chamber is stone blank, empty, and eerily anonymous, as if it's waiting for someone or something that never arrived. In every corner, expectation gave way to confusion. Where, in the pharaoh's grand design, were the treasures to dazzle eternity? There were no golden masks or carved canopic jars, no lavish artifacts of afterlife. Even the walls refused decoration. Instead, austerity dominates, polished dignity, not opulence. Some researchers argue this is all part of a complex ritual language, an architecture meant to speak through geometry and silence, not pictographs and baubles. But even that explanation can't shake the sense that something is missing, deliberately omitted. If this was a tomb, why does it feel like a fortress built to defend secrets, not celebrate life? Light catching an edge, I pressed into a side niche where the angles ran straight and each join was so tight it was nearly invisible even to the touch. It was here the math hit hardest. The pyramid's alignment with true north, measured to within tiny fractions of a single degree, impossibly exact for a time when compasses did not exist. No random pile, no mere pile of rocks. The king's chamber, cut from blood-red granite, yawned open before me, a space colder and even more silent than the tunnels that led to it. My voice died in the vastness. I circled one of the immense blocks forming the ceiling, reaching up to trace the line where two stones met. Each weighed as much as 80 tons, so massive that, even today, placing them with such finesse would demand careful planning. Dust trembled beneath my boots. I felt it again, this blend of reverence and suspicion. Standing in that solemn chamber, the official story began to feel threadbare. If tens of thousands of men had hauled these stones, where are their tools, their burials, their sacrifices? Egyptologists remind us that evidence of worker villages has been unearthed near the plateau, and I do not ignore that. Still, for all these theories, nobody has found blueprints or a single scroll laying out, step by step, how the pyramid rose from sand to sky. What happened here happened beyond the record, at the far edge of memory. Some say the answer lies in the mathematics, a sacred geometry supposedly mapped to the stars, to the cycles of the Nile, even to the dimensions of Earth itself. Others whisper of secrets in the stone itself, clues hidden not in grand inscriptions, but in the raw perfection of the architecture. Wandering these frigid corridors, I cannot help but notice the curious lack of evidence tying Khufu directly to the pyramid itself. A handful of later sources, some graffiti in a nondescript upper chamber, and, crucially, an immense silence. Little more has come to light. Here's my twist. As I move through a shaft so narrow that I have to crouch, torchlight reveals something truly uncanny. The blocks, set at impossible angles, so tightly joined that even centuries of shifting sands have failed to slip a sliver of dust between them. I brush my fingertips against the seam, and that chill, that uncanny precision, feels almost like a denial, almost as if the pyramid itself wants to remain unsolved. There's an unsettled pulse beneath it all, a dull thrum that feels not like the heartbeat of the ancient Egyptians, but like the echo of another mind, a logic I can't quite decipher. Could this have been the work of a civilization more advanced than the textbooks allow, their traces scrubbed away by time and secrecy? Or is that merely the product of my own breathless awe, here alone under thousands of tons of stone? What is fact is that the official record, for all its confidence, rests on a curiously fragile foundation. No plans, no first-hand testimony, not even a royal mummy to witness for Khufu. The more these stones refuse to speak, the more whispers flare up, in the darkness, in the cold air heavy with dust, in the stretch of each soundless corridor. Beyond this room, deeper in the pyramid's silent heart, the air shivers with the possibility of another truth, one the stones will not reveal easily. Crossing the shadowed landing at the pyramid's core, I pause to study the straight lines and immaculate joints. Crossing the shadowed landing at the pyramid's core, I pause to study the straight lines and immaculate joints. Every block, monumental, uniform, sits with a precision that feels almost alien beneath my fingertips. I can smell the ancient dust pressing against stale, cool air. In these echoing passages, every step I take cracks the silence, making me feel both trespasser and witness. I trace one seam with my thumb. The fact that a single sheet of paper could not pass between these colossal stones is unsettling. The passage bends out of sight, each angle sharp, each curve deliberate. Everywhere the stones are cold, fused together with an order you do not expect in the accidental churn of history. Beyond me, floodlights from the modern world glance off the limestone, trying to illuminate what millennia have tried to hide. Outside, the Giza sun burns white and merciless. I emerge from the gloom and pace the perimeter, boots biting into fine grit. My eyes follow the lines, so straight it is as if a compass needle were forged into stone. I unlock my phone's compass, double-checking out of skepticism, and watch the arrow tremble, embarrassed by its own imprecision. The Great Pyramid sits here more accurately than the tools in my pocket could ever hope to achieve. Mainstream sources will tell you this monument aligns within a fraction of a single degree to true north, a boast that holds up, whether I check satellite maps, survey marks, or the shadow of my own body at noon. I turn to the lower courses, running my hand along granite, blocks the weight of a train car, some up to 80 tons, each one breathed out from the heart of Aswan's distant quarries. The surface is smooth, fine as glass, shot through with flecks of pink and black. I drop to my knees and try to find an edge, a flaw, some sign of handwork. But the fit is so tight, even a razor's edge would come up wanting. I imagine workmen with battered copper chisels, sweat plastering their brow, and the image crumbles. Even with modern machinery, moving, let alone precisely fitting, stone of this size would still be a demanding undertaking. I recall the old manuals, diagrams of sledges and ramps, armies of workers dragging and levering with ropes, copper chisels taking bite after agonizing bite from hard, ancient granite. Yet just last year, a team of engineers tried this on a block half the size and, after days of effort, managed to scratch out only a shallow trench, less progress than the wind achieves in a single night. It is hard not to feel a rising sense of the impossible here. The conventional narrative grows brittle when measured by the stone itself. The popular story of the pyramids, that they are the simple result of labor, time, and primitive tools, struggles to stand up to contact with the facts now echoing off these walls. The sun dips lower, its slanting light spattering the desert with bronze and shadow. I turn to face the plateau. Sand swirls at my feet in tiny, restless eddies, fragments from an era long lost, grains that once settled on savanna grass before the desert reigned here. I remember reading about how Giza was not always a sea of sand. There was a time, perhaps thousands of years before pharaohs first dreamed of immortality, when rainfall still fell in sheets and papyrus rustled in the breeze, when the Nile spilled its banks and made the land lush and green. The sands here are both a curtain and a clue, a sign that deep changes rewrote the land as surely as any army or king. Suddenly, a voice behind me shatters the silence. A site surveyor, coated in khaki dust, speaks in a low tone that echoes in the stillness. He asks if I have noticed the way the light fails inside, even with the corridor's narrow shafts and apertures. He tells me, conspiratorially, that some believe torches and oil lamps would not only have choked the passages with smoke, but also left marks that have never been found. I picture that, crowded tunnels, without a single sooty fingerprint on the ceiling blocks. The air feels heavier, the shadows deeper, as if the pyramid itself is withholding some crucial secret from prying eyes. I walk around the base, mind racing. For every answer the textbooks offer, the stones supply a counter-question. Each touch point, each surface, all whisper that the conventional tools and stories do not fit. If these blocks were shaped and set by hand, why can't we recreate their methods, even in controlled experiments? If generations of human labor, organized, ingenious, relentless, produced these marvels, what unknown knowledge have we lost that once made such precision possible? The call to afternoon prayer drifts across the plateau, serious and somber, reminding me that the past does not, perhaps, sleep as quietly as we pretend. Just beyond the site's security fence, modern Cairo pulses and thrums, pressing up against relics of a civilization so advanced or so alien in logic that its makers sometimes feel more like visitors from a vanished world than ancestors in our own. Another suspenseful pause grips the atmosphere. As the sun bleeds out behind stray clouds, I find myself standing at the threshold, caught between the certainty of sand and the riddle of stone. Inside, the geometry of the passages beckons. Outside, the desert wind tangles around my ankles, urging me deeper into the labyrinth. Why are we so willing to dismiss impossibility when it stares us in the face? What else have we misunderstood? What secrets still lie mute beneath these granite vaults? I linger at the vast, silent base, eyes pressed closed for a long moment, trying to feel the heartbeat of something massive and hidden. My hands are coated with the memory of quartz and dust. It is the hush before a deeper plunge, a step further into shadow. As night threatens the horizon and the temperature drops, an unease settles, a sense that there may be more to this place than stones on sand. The perimeter, the alignment, the weight, and the silence all swirl in my mind, forming a puzzle that refuses easy answers. Some nights I wonder if the true history of our world is not buried here, but humming quietly just out of reach, daring someone to listen. A restless evening finds me deep within the pyramid's granite-lined core, flashlight pooling over an expanse of ruby-hued stone. A restless evening finds me deep within the pyramid's granite-lined core, flashlight pooling over an expanse of ruby-hued stone. The beam highlights the flecks of deep mineral sparkling like faint stars trapped under billions of pounds of oldest stone, while the rest retreats into total blackness. With every echoing scuff of my boot, I feel a persistent chill slip down my arms. The weight of untold centuries presses in at every angle, thick as the dust beneath my soles. Sometimes it feels like the walls themselves are watching, holding tight to secrets long forbidden. In the bitter cold, I replay old experiment footage in my mind. Teams of determined researchers hunched over slabs of granite, copper chisels in hand. They carve, grind, strike, over and over. Within minutes, the copper edges fold like soft wax, scraping uselessly against the glare of resilient granite. The stones have barely noticed. Days of effort yield nothing more than ragged scrapes. No smooth edge, no precision line, not even a neat corner. The experimenters' faces twist between disbelief and frustration. Their tools are blunted, their patience nearly spent. But then my flashlight sweeps across another face of stone, untouched for ages. Here, the surface is almost glassy smooth under a film of blowing sand. There, running parallel with the edge, a groove scythes so true and level that it appears almost drawn by mechanical intent. I run my hand along it, and something in my palm tingles, the sensation inexplicable. What force did this? Copper chisels, or something with sharper intent, colder ambition. My mind lingers on claims I've heard whispered in the corners of conferences and in late-night forums about stones dissected with precision that mocks the modern toolkit. A few engineers will talk off the record. Christopher Dunn, for instance, once led me to a slab not far from here. He pointed, wordless, at a perfect circle cut dead center into the hardest granite, a borehole so precise that light spun lazily along its circumference as he passed his torch over it. Dunn whispered about tools lost to time, civilizations erased, machining that left behind what he called a spiral score. Evidence, perhaps, of advanced technology under the skin of antiquity. A shiver ripples up my spine. I pause at the edge of a yawning shaft. Cold air, tinged with centuries-old dust, coils up from below. I lower myself carefully, boots scraping over the strange regularity of the stones, almost as if laid not just for the monumental, but the mechanical. In these moments, mainstream explanations start to unravel at the seams. We have always been told that an army of laborers, armed with only the simplest of implements, accomplished this feat under the reign of Khufu, that shadowy 4th Dynasty king. But walk these passageways, and it is hard to imagine bare hands and copper against resistance, this absolute. As I descend deeper, my flashlight flickers. Shadows reach out along the walls, stretching and twisting. The world narrows to a single question, echoing through these halls. If Khufu's people truly built the Great Pyramid, why does almost nothing from his era proclaim it? Where are the dedicated cartouches, the chronicles of triumph? There are only the briefest, most debated traces, washed thin by the river of time. The rest is eerily silent, like the void inside a sealed chamber, never meant to be disturbed. Suddenly, a twist. Just beyond a collapsed threshold, my beam catches the edge of something very different, tool marks unlike the previous ones, coarser, less patient. Another era, perhaps. Historians say wind-blown sand once drowned the Sphinx up to its chin, its ancient lion's face lost to sight for centuries at a time. That sand still swirls outside tonight, a veil over half-truths and half-found relics. For a brief moment, I let memory slide further back, imagining the Sphinx when it was uncovered, not created, its guardianship of the Giza Plateau, appropriated by later kings. Some theorists argue it was only modified, repurposed by the pharaohs, rather than birthed by them. In this narrative, the oldest monuments are not the product of glory-hungry dynasts, but echoes of a civilization already veiled in legend by the time Khufu's masons set to work. The air grows heavier as I squeeze through a crevice, a sense of trespass, as though I am crossing a threshold into some deeper, even more forbidden layer of the past. My flashlight's cone lands on another stone joint, so tightly fitted I can barely slip a razor blade between the blocks. The unnatural precision stuns me into silence. I bend close, exhaling, and cool vapor drifts across the granite, vanishing into the seam. Is this the work of patient hands over countless lifetimes? Or could it be something else? In these moments I am haunted by the cold, deliberate geometry all around me. Each block is a statement in stone, laid down with intent that feels outside the bounds of the known. The official story, the one taught across textbooks and documentaries, asks me to believe that basic hand tools sculpted perfection from the hardest rock hundreds of thousands of times. But here in the oppressive silence, that account grows frail. My path opens into a vaulted chamber, echoes shivering upward into hidden corners. I step carefully, light sweeping over the walls. The regular rhythm of my breathing merges with the ancient hush. Suddenly, a fragment of old paint, ochre, maybe lapis traces, catches my eye on a barely noticeable shelf of rock, clinging to an inscription half devoured by time. It is wholly unremarkable, except for its presence here, deeper than any guidebook mentions. There is no name, no clear history, just a whisper that something or someone persisted here, carving memory into adamantine stone. Yet even these fragments are surrounded by absence. Here, the history is written in ellipses, not bold declarations. I find myself running gloved fingertips along the grooves, pressing for secrets the silence does not easily yield. A sudden vibration. It could be the wind outside, or something shifting in the layers below. The knowledge holders at the surface, their voices always so certain, so final, offer tidy summaries about tombs, funeraries, legacy. But nothing up here feels as straightforward as legacy. Down here, the stones resist easy meaning, offering instead only the unbroken challenge of their existence. The almost perfect boreholes, impossibly straight cuts, glassy surfaces. These are not the marks of accident or improvisation. They are deliberate, humming with a different kind of agency, one lost beneath the shifting sands of official timeline and trust. As I linger in this gloom, the Giza Plateau above feels impossibly distant, a place of blinding sunlight and tidy explanations. Here in the layered hush, the stakes surge open. If the old story falls, whole chapters of our human history unravel. The accepted guardians of heritage might not just be protectors, but gatekeepers, choosing what we can or cannot know. I exhale once more, tasting fear and something else. Anticipation. Walls close in as I descend the splintered passageways, breath frost, thin in the stagnant dark. It's impossible to describe the hush in these corridors. My footsteps send distant echoes along the limestone, but otherwise silence reigns, thicker somehow than the very walls. The beam of my flashlight makes the dust glitter in mid-air, but here, deep under millions of tons of stone, nothing feels accidental. I run my hand along a block, cool and smooth, as if the stone itself refuses to age. The deeper I move, the more the air changes, each breath laced with a coldness that belies the sunburned desert just above. A few paces ahead, the passage narrows so tightly I have to turn my shoulders sideways. There are no visible torch brackets, no natural alcoves where lamps might have stood. And yet, as I lift my light, the ceilings above me remain pristine, paler even than moonlit sand, and so clean they almost shimmer. Every mainstream guide insists torches once flickered here, lighting Pharaoh's grand ambitions. But in over a century of crawling, sweeping, dusting every inch, archaeologists have never found the telltale stains. Not a ghost of soot, not a fingerprint of oil residue, not the faint brown haze you'd expect from firelight brushing stone for decades, if not generations. It's as if the pyramid interiors, passage after passage, chamber after chamber, are untouched by anything so ordinary as fire. Above ground, Egyptian monuments show soot stains that stubbornly resist weather and time. But down here, below the relentless churn of the desert, it's as if darkness was never challenged at all. And that, more than anything the guides recite, chills me. Because if it wasn't torches or lamps, what did they use to see in the bowels of the world's largest stone labyrinth? There's another piece of the puzzle. The Pyramid of Khufu, what we call the Great Pyramid, has so many corridors, both mapped and rumored, that even the most comprehensive diagrams look like spider webs spun in haste, tight sloping tunnels, echoing grand galleries, and chambers that seem to serve no overt ritual or practical purpose, a network both bewildering and hypnotic in its symmetry. My guide, an old caretaker who speaks in a whisper without ever lowering his voice, pauses near one junction. He tells me with the faintest grin, most visitors expect hieroglyphs or golden treasures. But there is nothing of the sort. These walls are bare. No inscriptions, no sacred prayers, not even the faded scrawl of a worker's mark. Only polished limestone, reflecting my light in cold mathematical precision. The silence, he insists, is the pyramid's true inscription. Now and then, a gust of memory carries us back to the Giza plateau under blistering sun, to imaginations of torch-bearing laborers shuffling through these same corridors, sweat-soaked and determined. But the vision doesn't hold up. If thousands of workers wielded smoky torches, why is the stone above perfectly white, untouched, unmarked? Some say the lack of soot is hardly a revelation. Perhaps the walls were cleaned, perhaps the stones replaced. But even the most skeptical admit there's no evidence of such restoration. And if you took a torch to the ceiling now, the smoke would cling, staining these stones almost instantly. The pyramid keeps its secrets, content to leave us squinting in the dark. I pause at a sharp corner. The way ahead descends even deeper, and the oppressive silence wraps tighter. Above me, The tunnel's ceiling curves smoothly, every joint flush, every surface almost impossibly flat for something laid millennia ago. Are these the fingerprints of primitive stoneworkers, or something stranger? A sudden pattern interrupt. As we emerge into one of the so-called air shafts, the temperature dips. I blink, startled. The shaft is narrow, a vent carved with uncanny precision from the burial chamber out, pointed straight at the stars. No torch could have burned here without quickly blackening the stone. And yet, here again, pure, pale limestone, as clear as the day it was placed. It's one more log thrown onto the fire of impossible precision. Who, or what, needed these immaculate passages, untouched by flame or soot or sweat? The accepted story of how this network was illuminated, and by whom, frays at the edges. Some mainstream Egyptologists double down, perhaps elaborate reflectors, bounced sunlight deeper into the core, or the workers employed lush, smokeless lamps lost to history. But those are theories balanced on the absence of evidence, born of necessity, not conviction. In these corridors, conviction gives way to doubt. Each gallery, each sharp echo, repeats the mystery, increasing the sense that we are chasing not just the secrets of a single pharaoh, but perhaps the missing keys to an entire chapter of history that official accounts would rather keep closed. The air here thickens, not from dust, but from possibility. Outside these tunnels, debate simmers. Robert Bauval, a name spoken quietly around certain sites, once faced open hostility for suggesting the Great Pyramid's alignment was not just a happy accident. He proposed something startling. The very placement of these monuments matches the 3 stars of Orion's belt with uncanny fidelity. Even more startling is the accuracy with which the pyramid lines up with true north, an ability no surviving record explains. Mainstream voices push back, scoffing at the correlation, insisting it's coincidence or simply ancient cleverness. But each challenge seems to raise more questions than it answers. If such cosmic alignments are accidental, why here, and why with such relentless precision? Notice what's missing, too, from these endless halls. Every other known royal tomb in Egypt, valley crypt, mountain chamber, sunken vault, bears the fingerprints of their makers. They are graffiti-riddled, heavy with treasures, packed with funerary rites and the relics of daily life. This pyramid, enigmatic, stripped to the bone, offers almost nothing in that regard. Every artifact pried out by the earliest explorers is the exception, not the rule. As I descend further, my heartbeat loud in my ears, I realize it is not death I fear here beneath the Giza plateau. It is the possibility that these blocks, silent, perfect, unreachable by any torch, were not laid for men at all. The silence and the cleanness speak not of human enterprise, but of intention beyond our understanding. Was this a tomb, or something else? Something left here by a civilization whose ways of working, of seeing, simply do not match our own. I catch myself shivering. And yet I keep moving, drawn by a presence within the stone, by the knowledge that every textbook explanation leaves something essential unsaid. Deep below, beneath a ceiling, so immaculate it almost defies time itself, I wonder what else has been sealed away, and why those who claim to know refuse to linger here in the dark for long. Above ground, the heat thickens, but it is not the sun that unsettles me. I step into the raw heat drifting over the Giza plateau, but it's not the desert or the noon sun that presses in on me. It's the feeling that every movement here is being watched. The stone faces of the pyramid stand silent, unmoving, while the wind gathers dust like lost echoes. In the shadows around the Great Pyramid, poverty and commerce tangle with secrecy. Everywhere I turn, someone is either looking for a tip or looking away. But the most powerful figure at Giza is nowhere in sight. Locals mention his name in hushed tones, sometimes with respect, sometimes with something sharper. Dr. Zahi Hawass, the gatekeeper, the man said to control the locks on everything this ancient world has left to reveal. I hear the stories while wandering a narrow alley behind the tourist stalls. The old vendor with sunburned skin taps the side of his nose as he leans closer. You want to see secrets? You need Dr. Hawass. Nobody goes underneath without his word. This is not just local myth. Hawass is everywhere in the official photographs, always near the front, a shadow at the elbow of each new discovery. They say he walks the corridors beneath the monuments. But the corridors that matter, the ones chiseled by hands long forgotten, remain tightly sealed. Officially, it's for preservation. But on the ground, the logic feels more like control than care. I drift past security gates, dodging stray camels, and see glimmers of the pyramid's underlying order. The surface is chaos, guides yelling, tourists sweating, dust grinding between teeth. Yet above it all, Hawass's influence settles like dust on every stone. Access is rationed. Archaeologists whisper about permits delayed, research denied, theories buried before they can breathe air. One foreign researcher, voice quaking from a memory still raw, tells me how his infrared imaging was halted mid-experiment. We don't want conspiracy, he croaks, but glances toward the heavy stone blocks, as if afraid the walls themselves might overhear. We want answers. They don't. There's an authority at play here that supersedes science. When a particular passage is closed, the rumor is never water damage or instability. It's always something more. A chamber just out of reach, a hypothesis, unconventional and dangerous, that might upset the order. I find myself chilled, not just by the cold touch of the limestone as I rest my hand on its centuries-old surface, but by the oppressive, ordered silence that guards these mysteries. The pyramid's supposedly open corridors snake invitingly before turning sharply into locked gates, the rest lost to darkness. No matter how much sunlight burns outside, inside the pyramid, the chill endures. A sudden pattern interrupt as I hear a voice echo from an open shaft. Two junior archaeologists are arguing, their words darting through cold air. They want us to label it as a dead end, one says. But the scan is clear. There's space behind that stone. Something's there. The other shakes her head, packing up their gear, already resigned. We're not supposed to dig, just record what's visible. You want to go up against him? The implication hangs. Challenging the official story means risking not just your job, but your right to return. I re-enter the blinding sun, the silence of stone replaced by street commotion, but my focus sharpens. Official records maintain the party line. The Great Pyramid was raised in around 20 years, built by thousands of skilled workers mobilized under Khufu's command. The might of ancient Egypt focused into a feat of engineering still unsurpassed. But the deeper I walk, the more the narrative itself seems to tremble. If Hawass and others alone decide what is released or denied, can we ever claim certainty about what happened here? Each denied permit is a closed book. Each locked door another century between us and the truth. At the edge of the plateau, a patch where the sand almost swallows your boots, I pause, squinting as stone blends seamlessly into the desert. The sheer scale of the blocks stuns me anew. Many are so precise, I can barely slide a razor into their seams, the fit too flawless for the tools we're told were available at the time. A shimmer of possibility rises. Christopher Dunn's claim flashes through my mind. He insists he's found evidence of drill cores so perfectly round and smooth. The only modern equivalent would require diamond-tipped machinery. I duck beneath a low lintel, brushing away the claggy taste of old air. Deep inside the pyramid, every footstep reverberates, a cold echo against the stone. The blocks loom overhead, weighing down the air, the silence as absolute as the darkness that gathers behind hidden stones. Official guides quote copper chisels and wooden sledges, describing workers sweating over every block. Yet modern attempts have failed to cut granite this way, the metal wearing to nothing against the stone. The experimenters left panting and defeated. The gap between theory and evidence gapes wider with every step. Twist. A sudden metallic clang interrupts my reverie. Around a shadowed bend and glimpse a modern steel door set deep in the ancient limestone, marked plainly off-limits. No explanation, no signs, save for a stiff sheet of paper curling in the dry breeze. Authorization required. Who decides what is authorized, and for whom? The authorities claim to be protecting history, yet the feeling is more that secrets are being caged. The weight of that door lingers in my mind long after I step away. It is a new kind of barrier, as formidable as any stone. Outside, the wind has shifted. I stand at the base of the pyramid, the sun dropping toward the west, and watch as a cluster of schoolchildren move past, their laughter scattering the pigeons. For them, and for us all, the accepted narrative trickles out. The story in school books, the one on guided tours, neat and linear as a ruler. But curiosity gnaws at the edges. Whose version of history is being carved, word by word, into the official record? And what if the true story, whatever it is, threatens to upend not just our timeline, but the very idea of human potential? As dark settles, the old city hums to life in the distance. The sand cools beneath my feet. My mind returns to the men and women who once walked this ground, perhaps carrying plans or mysteries to their graves. Did they foresee these centuries of scrutiny and secrecy? Or is the real secret not what's locked beneath the pyramids, but in the very effort to keep so many questions from being asked? Tonight, that silence is its own story, thicker and more persistent than even the rock. Above me, the vast geometry of the pyramids absorbs the dwindling light, each angle taut with meaning left unspoken. The longer I linger, the more anticipation grows, because the next layer is waiting, hidden, just out of reach. And so I gather up maps and digital overlays, eyes adjusting to the encroaching dusk, tracing the forgotten alignments that some say could change everything. Evening settles, like a heavy velvet shroud across the Giza plateau, the last blue drifting from the sky, while the wind scuffs sand in shallow, swirling eddies at my boots. I wedge myself between the jagged edges of a limestone block, tablet screen alive in my hands with a digital map of the site, lines and overlays pulsing with half-revealed intent. Each pinpoint and grid flickers with the ghost of a question. What did the ancients see in this geometry that everyone now tries so hard to call coincidence, to push aside like a trick of the horizon? Up above, the Giza pyramids punch midnight silhouettes against the dusky glow, their orientation forming an unsettling mirror of Orion's belt, or so Robert Bauval claimed in the years before his voice became a whisper, always there beneath the official story, never allowed to take center stage for too long. I track the digital lines, cold blue against a paler background, and try to let my skepticism hold. Astronomical alignments in ancient architecture are almost an expectation. Yet, here, the alignments do not just repeat a myth. They whisper a cosmic dialogue, a message mapped into stone with unnerving precision. When Bauval first drew the parallels, he argued that the three Great Pyramids do not neatly align north-south, but instead mimic the offbeat, staggered pattern of Orion's belt, just as that constellation would have appeared more than 10,000 years ago, back when the Nile was a wild, untamed vein through endless grassland. Official voices brushed this off as star-chasing, a fanciful reading of the stones. But I watch as my overlays line up, the constellation's 3 points falling, almost impossibly, across the pyramid's ground plan. It feels as though something ancient is breathing beneath my fingertips. The plateau's breath is a hush of shifting sand, a nighttime silence tight with unasked questions. Somewhere to my left, a patrolman's torch sweeps methodically. His beam skates over stone blocks, then away, out toward the open desert. In this strange hush, the notion that cosmic order lies baked into these foundations is almost comforting, and yet also deeply unsettling. Did intention sculpt these alignments, layering stellar mathematics onto the Giza sands? Or is it, all too conveniently for the protectors of orthodoxy, just another dazzling trick of numbers? I find the official explanations, ritual, happenstance, ring hollow against the weight of the geometry right in front of me. A cold shiver runs through the limbs of the plateau as I duck into a shallow fissure near the pyramid's base. My breath echoes ghostly down the passage, the musty air thick with the scent of antiquity and the faint copper tang of age-old dust. Every step is muffled by the worn smoothness of the stone beneath my boots, polished by centuries of cautious explorers and generations of guardians. I flick on a slim LED torch, the modern answer to what, officially, were simple oil lamps and torches used millennia before. That explanation always grated against the scale of this place, these suffocating corridors, the light-eating walls, the blocks interlocking with uncanny accuracy. The further in I press, the more I feel, the pyramid swallowing all sound. Inky darkness eats at the edge of the torch's spill, giving away only the nearest masonry, a cold, indifferent grey. Each seam so razor-straight it could slice through the fabric of accepted history. I run my fingers along one massive limestone block, count the almost invisible line where it meets the next, perfectly flush, and yet somehow laid by hand in an age we're told was primitive. Does official Egyptology truly expect us to believe that, in the absence of modern tools, ordinary builders shaped these stones with copper chisels alone? A memory surfaces, a video clip I'd watched, skeptics clanging ragged chisels against a granite core, blades blunting within minutes, stone barely marked, layers upon layers beneath my boots, stone blocks as firm as bedrock. In my mind, the stories I've been told since childhood, that these pyramids were tombs and nothing else. But even a casual observer can see there's more hidden here. Geometry, astronomy, and something else. Something woven through the corridors and silent chambers. A riddle boiling beneath centuries of sand. I round another corner, the corridor narrowing, and find myself staring at a precise intersection, a joint, not just between stones, but between centuries-old orthodoxy and the jarring simplicity of direct evidence. I pause, senses sharpened by the sudden narrowing of space. The walls catch and echo every footfall, every slow intake of breath. Here, in the pressing dark, the notion that the Giza pyramids were shaped solely to serve ancient kings feels off. If this were merely a tomb, why code its placement so carefully to a set of stars, ones fixed forever in the language of cosmic cycles? There is a logic here, scribed not in words but in stone and shadow, intent, I suspect, too deliberate to be written off as ceremonial convenience. Suspense thickens as I page through the scans, layers revealing themselves with a surgeon's precision. Beneath the pyramid, the layout takes on the quality of a maze, a network of passageways and chambers so complicated that some areas remain debated or only recently scanned, even now. It's as if the architects wanted their secrets, not just to endure, but to outlast our every attempt to explain them away. My torch beam traces a set of carvings, faded, almost erased by time, along one lintel. In that quiet moment, I wonder whether these marks are the signatures of stonemasons or something more, cryptic reminders to the future. Graffiti from a civilization that defies the familiar timeline. Outside, the wind stiffens. I catch, for just an instant, a strange, low hum. The sound may be nothing, but it prickles at the back of my neck. The sands shift again, exposing, then swiftly concealing, a sharp edge of limestone where the outer casing once gleamed. In the starlight, it's impossible not to recall West's controversial idea that the Sphinx, lurking nearby in the darkness, might predate even the oldest dynasties, its body reshaped and recarved over eons. Could these stone giants be beacons, not just monuments, signaling stories deeper and vaster than anyone dares to admit? I return to the overlay, tracing with my fingertip along the impossible geometry mapped from sky to earth. There, the Orion stars burn coldly, their positions drifting slightly with the precession of the ages. If the original intent was to align with a celestial event so ancient that it drew desert and stone into its orbit, then we stand on ground designed to broadcast a message, one that has barely begun to reach modern ears. There's stubbornness in the mainstream resistance, a refusal to consider that anything outside familiar narratives might have shaped human history. And yet, again and again, The stones speak their truth for those willing to listen. The oppressive hush grows heavier, as if the pyramid itself is withholding the last vital clue. My hands are cold even in this protected shadow, each pulse in my fingertips echoing down the lifeless corridors. What secrets did these builders hope to seal away from the centuries, and who were they truly building for? There are moments, hemmed in by echoing stone and the unblinking gaze of Orion overhead, where I feel less like an investigator and more like an unwitting participant in a ritual as ancient as the desert itself. An hour passes, though in the pyramid's belly, time becomes slippery, almost unmoored. When I step back outside, the plateau now nearly swallowed in night, my eyes struggle to readjust. A desert fox darts between crumbling ruins. In the chill air, voices from distant tourists rise, then flatten into the emptiness. Yet the geometry remains steadfast, daring the careful observer to draw uncomfortable conclusions. Was all this deliberate? A coded signal from a civilization with knowledge just beyond the reach of accepted history? Or simply the world's greatest coincidence? As the cold desert wind finds its way down my collar, the sense of unfinished business clings harder. I look to where Orion gleams, just above the horizon, the constellation's blue-white stars half lost against the sodium glow of modern Cairo. There is a visible tension between what we think we know and the impossibility that something more had their hands on this ground, long before pharaohs put their names in cartouches. The plateau, for tonight, is silent, but its riddles rattle in the mind, louder than any history teacher's certainty. I gather my things, the sand swirling over ancient stone at my feet, as dark and secretive as any forbidden archive. Somewhere in that darkness, the answers are waiting, just out of reach. But first, tomorrow brings me face to face with a guardian older than pharaohs, whose body is scarred by water older than the desert itself. The sun cracks a coppery seam over the Giza plateau as I start toward the crouching lion of stone, drawn forward by the Sphinx, its face battered and inscrutable, its elongated gaze fixed somewhere far beyond the ordinary reach of memory. The morning air tastes of grit and something older, an almost metallic bite carried off the wind. My boots sink into granular sand that eddies about the Sphinx's massive paws. I try to picture pharaohs and priests, their shadows lost beneath these scattered stones, but the ground at my feet tells a stranger story. On closer approach, the Sphinx's flanks dissolve into labyrinths of scalloped, wavering channels. Sunlight traces these furrows with softness, but up close, each groove is as raw as an open wound. Here, the limestone looks gnawed away, not by the steady abrasion of storm-blown sand, but by something far more violent and elusive. I run my hand across an eroded wall. The stone is cool, pitted, veined with memory. It almost feels as if a river once flowed here, carving these sinuous lines with patient, insistent force. The official story blames centuries of wind and grit, saying the Sphinx has always watched over desert silence. But that explanation frays quickly in the face of the evidence. A sudden hush presses in, so thick that even my own breaths echo, a reminder of how little sound travels between these stones. When I step back, the silhouette of the Sphinx seems to hover above a sea of vanished water. Geologists like Robert Schoch and the late John Anthony West studied damage at the base and sides, mapping erosion patterns that defy the desert's thirst. They speak in careful language about dissolution, about rainfall not seen since long before the first pyramid stones were hewn from their quarry beds. What storms could possibly have lashed this creature so long and so deep? For a moment, I allow myself to picture the Sahara, not as an endless tide of gold and ochre, but as a living sea of green, a place where wild streams braided across grassy plains, where herds of animals grazed on lush banks, and rain fell with indifferent regularity. The Sphinx's battered body, grooved by downpours, begins to make a strange and perilous sense. I duck into the lee of the monument and crouch near channels that plunge downward, almost vertical in their descent, a pattern West believed could only have been made by water rolling off the Sphinx's flanks in sheets, year after year, over centuries. The story I was taught, the one brushed clean by textbooks and museum labels, pegs this colossus to a time when Egypt was already a kingdom of stone and sand. The pharaohs, so the story goes, reclaimed the desert and left their mark. But these wounds tell of an older world. I find myself repeating West's heresy beneath my breath. What if the Sphinx remembers a flood no civilization recalls? Just then, as if to reinforce the break with accepted truth, I spot faint green lichen blossoming in a crack near the sculpture's paw, life clinging in the wake of vanished water. Every detail here teeters on the edge of myth. I have read the conventional timelines many times. The last period of heavy rain here was 12,000 years ago, a time long before Egypt's kings, when the Sahara bloomed and the world's great ice sheets withered. That date is everything, because if the Sphinx truly bears the scars of that distant wet age, then the entire story of the pyramids, and perhaps human civilization itself, sways like a reed in a sudden storm. Official Egyptology still clings to its chronology, cracks sealed by reputations and authority, but these ancient marks remain silent proof against the desert's endlessly repeated song. The wind intensifies, whistling over the half-buried pores and into channels that ring out with a whispery resonance. I step back to the visitor path as a tour group rounds the bend. Their guide points out the Sphinx's missing nose, narrating the usual tale. No mention of lost rain or forbidden epochs. Their laughter dissolves behind me, but the spell remains in the quiet aftermath. It is in these solitary moments, swept by shifting sand and the weight of stone, that the edges of consensus begin to blur. A sudden jolt hits as I recall another curiosity, the documented periods when the Sphinx's monumental body lay buried, sand climbing up its sides until only the enigmatic head stared out, the rest lost to time and neglect. Was this accidental, or an attempt to hide a knowledge dangerous to those who followed? The narrative wavers, authority flickering like a candle in the desert wind. In these dusk-lit corridors of thought, I flip the story again. Maybe those later rulers inherited a monument already ancient by their standards, a relic from a people lost to us. The argument usually ends here. No, the pharaoh did it, the guides say, and the rest is lost in the wind. But the evidence does not align as easily as the blocks of the pyramids supposedly do. The notion unsettles me, as does the fact that Khufu's name, bound forever to the Great Pyramid, connects only loosely to the stones themselves. No physical remains of that pharaoh have ever been found within the silent heart of the pyramid. The symbols of power are sharp and persistent, but tangible bodies, as if by design, are absent. Was this a king's empty boast, or a secret by intent? I catch myself staring at the cold, seamless stonework anew. As the sun rises further, the air trembles with heat. But here, in the half-shadows clinging to the Sphinx's back, it is still cold. I can almost taste the water that once pelted these flanks, a sensation at odds with the present day. The network of channels looks more like ancient riverbeds than battle wounds, and every groove pulls me deeper into a labyrinth of uncertainty. The academic gatekeepers remain unmoved, dismissing West's theory with the finality of a judge's gavel. Their consensus is tidy, bricked up tight against doubt. Yet these stony archives, archivists in their own right, are never so dogmatically silent. The Sphinx's wounds remain a riddle that centuries of sand cannot heal. Some say that the Sphinx, like the Great Pyramid itself, is a cipher within a cipher. To unlock it, you must first accept that the most persistent stories might be deliberate misdirections. I pause beside a limestone channel, tracing its curve with a fingertip. Each fracture, each furrow, hints at a tempest no desert remembers. Was Egypt once the inheritance of a civilization whose name is lost, their memory surviving only in wounds carved by vanished rain? A faint vibration beneath my palm, just a trick of morning wind, or the pull of a secret yearning to be known. To this day, the official story resists the intrusion of such doubt. But the Sphinx herself seems carved from mystery. Her silence is less a lack of answer than an invitation. Dig deeper, listen closer, question the boundaries drawn by those who police the past. In the oppressive hush, a split-second vision erupts, a flashback born from some ancient yearning. Grassland stretches across the plateau, the Sphinx a pale island in rolling greenery. Lightning flickers. Rain hammers stone. For just an instant, I am not witness, but participant in the birth of a legend, the fall of a lost age. The vision dissolves. The sky is blue, the sand once more golden and dry. But my worldview will not return to its original shape. The Sphinx's secrets still linger inside me like the cool persistence of water hidden just below rock. The stakes loom larger now, not just a matter of chronology, but the legitimacy of every expert who told us the past was sewn up and solved. Once more inside the chill dark of the pyramid, I edge my way along walls whose blocks may shield more than passageways. Once more, the passage draws me in, the air changing from the late afternoon haze of the plateau to the biting, almost mineral cold of the limestone corridors. Grit scrapes beneath my boots as I move deeper, light from my torch dancing over stone the shade of bone, revealing only hints of the block's true enormity. These megalithic walls stifle sound. Every step echoes, quickly strangled by centuries of silence. Down here, in this gloom where the pyramid's belly tightens around you, the mind sharpens. Imagination runs wild, haunted by rumors of spaces as yet unseen and stories that refuse to die. It's hard not to sense intention in the maze, a design that confuses as much as it guides. My hand brushes hieroglyphs, some crisp, others worn down to whispers by ages of pilgrims, robbers, and officials. Not all corridors end in chambers open to tourists. Some taper to dead ends. Others reach monolithic slabs whose fit is so keen, not even a sheet of paper slips between. What are they guarding? Some of the blueprints I have studied, photocopied scraps found in old Cairo archives, hint at anomalies behind these stone seals, abrupt voids, geometric discrepancies, subtle deviations in temperature barely caught by modern thermal scans. Are these accidental failings or deliberate misdirection? I press on, following the drip of condensation off some unseen, persistent leak. The air thickens the deeper I go, as though dust and secrets are sharing the same breath. Beneath my fingers, the wall radiates cold. Along the corridor, one block sits subtly proud, a telltale sign, some say, of a hidden passage or compartment. In the echoing dark, it feels as if the stones are watching just as closely as I watch them. Pausing, I recall tales of advanced technology that supposedly crackled to life here, long before copper tools or wooden sledges. Some fringe researchers speculate about electromagnetic anomalies or ancient drills, but to feel the stones under your own skin is not the cold proof of a scientist's measurement. Instead, the sensation is electric, a pulse of possibility, a hum of forgotten power that prickles the hairs on the back of my neck. Standing here, I cannot discount the claim that something lost, maybe even something engineered, remains dormant in the fabric of these walls. But the official story in Egypt is rarely simple. At every turn, it seems there are hands intent on steering the narrative. I think about the decades of excavations led by powerful figures, men whose reputations are woven into the very stones. Some corridors have been cleared, dusted, and labeled for the world to see. Others remain off-limits, their secrets rationed out in passing references or never spoken of at all. Modern archaeologists might claim that every important corner has been mapped or theorized, yet the rumors of forbidden chambers whisper even louder in the dark. I duck beneath a low stone lintel, my back scraping cool granite. Light flickers on what was once thought to be a bare wall, but up close I can just make out traces of ancient mortar, interrupted by faint outlines resembling a doorway covered up centuries ago. The corridor branches, one path leading upward, the other descending at a sharper angle than any tourist would ever be allowed to follow. Down there, the air is cooler, more metallic. The silence grows oppressive, as if it is warning against intrusion. For a few steps, I let my light fall away from the floor and onto the ceiling. It seems perfectly flat, impossibly so, like a single piece of engineered stone. The effect is unsettling, almost as if the pyramid's interior was not so much built as composed. An artifact of design, so precise, it hints at knowledge we're not meant to reconcile with mere chisels and ropes. A distant thunder rolls overhead, sand shifting on the plateau above. It brings to mind the erosion patterns on the Sphinx, just beyond the pyramid's shadow. Some geologists argue that only rains unseen in modern Egypt, downpours at least 12,000 years past, could work such scars into limestone. The implication is staggering. If the weathering is genuine, then the monuments might be survivors from a vanished world, built by people or powers whose stories are buried even deeper than these secret hallways. A sudden change breaks my concentration. The ground here is strangely warm, almost as if it is holding on to a memory of heat. There's no explanation. No sunlight reaches this far, and my torch gives off little warmth. I kneel and place my palm flat. For a moment, the world above vanishes. There is only the thunderous silence, the coarse taste of dust, and the sense that something here is concealed by design. It reminds me of the rumors I've collected, stories of researchers turned away at the threshold, their discoveries silenced by bureaucracy or quiet warnings. The pyramid, after all, has long been a battleground in the war between orthodox history and heresy. The closer I get to the innermost sanctum, the more aware I become of the unspoken lines that no outsider is meant to cross. Time seems to turn viscous inside the pyramid. My watch ticks on, but it feels like hours since I lost sight of daylight. Up above, tourists snap photos at the king's chamber, trading stories of mummies and pharaohs, never knowing that Khufu's remains have never been found in these vast halls. Down here, all I hear is the soft hiss of air pressed around secrets and the unmistakable suggestion that some knowledge is forbidden, hidden in darkness both literal and official. As I squeeze through a narrowing, nearly invisible seam in the corridor, I force my thoughts to arrange themselves around what's possible. Every step becomes an act of resistance against the cold, against fatigue, and, most of all, against the weight of the accepted story. If there was once a technology here, or a civilization powerful enough to build the impossible, perhaps their greatest achievement was not in what they revealed, but what they managed to hide. A shadow moves ahead, my own, distorted by the torch. At the far end, a slab of stone leans oddly, as if abandoned in the process of closing off some deeper vault. Here, in this stifling emptiness, I start to understand why so many have risked careers and credibility to chase the pyramid's secrets. The sense of a threshold, of standing before something world-altering, is almost physical. It tugs at every certainty I carried in from the surface. Now I am left with the oppressive quiet, the brushing sand, the sharp tang of stone dust in my lungs. The answers here are not facts to be catalogued. They are experiences, layered and elusive, requiring persistence, and maybe even a willingness to defy the warnings of official guardians. What if the Great Pyramid only pretends to be a tomb, and remains at its heart a fortress for ancient knowledge? In this moment I wonder what price is paid, and by whom, to keep these secrets buried beneath so many tons of granite. Ahead, light falls away into the black, and word has already filtered in about outsiders, pushed back from these corridors, work lost, dismissed, or quietly sealed inside guarded archives. Beneath a slivered moon, I move through a corridor barely wider than my shoulders, the air thick with ancient dust and, more than that, with the sense of stories forbidden more by silence than by stone. My flashlight's beam dances over the limestone walls, illuminating masons' marks and, deeper still, the evidence of hands. Whose hands? My mind cannot help but ask. And for whose purpose? There is a living tension here, as if the stones themselves are keeping secrets, guarding truths bound by an invisible contract with the past. Giza's grandeur towering above the plateau, draws not only crowds but controversy. Its very presence a challenge to easy explanations. In the official accounts, the story feels tightly wound. The pharaonic legacy, the genius of state-driven labor, the insistence that every question has already been answered with a scholar's certainty. But I cannot ignore the undercurrent. Researchers and seekers, sometimes celebrated, often dismissed, turned away at the threshold by clipped, official denials. A pattern emerges, and not just in the sandstone grains beneath my boots, but in the archives, in the lost correspondence, and in the missing names. Those who once dared to suggest Egypt's past may not be so neatly closed. Outside, the wind kicks up. Sand skitters down the steps behind me, and for one unnerving moment, the world seems emptied of all human sound. In this silence, denial becomes something heavier than a word. Stories circulate of men and women whose findings were too novel, too challenging, and never again invited to dig. There's an exile here, a kind of professional banishment, as chilling as descending alone into a stone chamber and finding the door swing shut behind you. The guardians of Egypt's narrative, whether motivated by duty, pride, or something else, draw their own invisible boundaries around mystery. I recall the late afternoon meetings in Cairo's marble-floored offices, where conversations about the past are always careful. The question is never just about archaeology. It is about the story Egypt chooses to tell the world. Take, for example, Dr. Zahi Hawass, a name that echoes through every corridor of Egyptology as an unyielding defender of the mainstream view. His devotion to the orthodox timeline is well known among those who navigate the edges of these secrets. When skeptics approach with claims of lost civilizations or technology beyond the means of the Old Kingdom, the response is as swift as it is final. Evidence that cannot be explained away is often dismissed. Lines of inquiry are redirected into the safe arms of well-worn narratives. Yet, every defense only sharpens the suspicion. Every closing of the record only strengthens the resolve among those unwilling to yield. Flashbulb moments come to mind. West's speculation about the Sphinx, the suggestion that the ancient monument's eroded body points not just to the wind, but perhaps to a time when rain soaked the edge of the Sahara. On the surface, these ideas are rejected, either for lack of evidence or, as many quietly admit, because they raise questions too provocative for the official story. Even as some experts turn away, choosing career security over controversy, acceptance over intellectual risk, the stones remain unmoved. Their surfaces whisper of long-missed climate, or vanished peoples insinuated in the uneven pitting and softened lines. This allegiance to tradition is not an Egyptian invention, though here it feels encoded in the landscape. Resistance to alternative frameworks is as much about pride, national and professional, as about evidence. The implication is clear. To allow a different version of Egypt's past to stand is to cede something vital, perhaps even sacred, in the country's sense of itself. It is not a conspiracy in the shadows, but a consensus forged in the open, a system built as painstakingly as the pyramid's blocks. If the established story falters, so too does the authority of its keepers. I once shared a late meal under the lattice of a small Cairo cafe, the call to prayer drifting in through jasmine dusk. A local researcher, her credentials impeccable, her voice almost a whisper, confessed that she had deliberately steered away from the Sphinx in her own work. "It's not worth the doors they'll close on you," she murmured. That chill of exclusion, it seems, is more than academic. It stretches into livelihoods, into who gets to descend the ladders and sift through the sand. Here, challenging the accepted script is not just career suicide. It is a form of vanishing, your findings filed away, your invitations unsent, your story muted beneath the world's loudest monuments. But as I press deeper into the Giza plateau, the evidence does not recede. If anything, it grows more insistent. There are the drill marks, the cool precision of cuts thought impossible with the tools of a Bronze Age kingdom. In certain corners of the pyramid's heart, Christopher Dunn's observations echo, perfectly round drill cores, left behind, like a signature from craftsmen whose methods we no longer possess. What are we to make of these details? The stone nearly fused in circles, the smooth surfaces that would challenge even our modern best. Rounding a corner, I come upon a solitary shaft descending into darkness, cool air gusting upward as if exhaling memory from the tomb. Light glimmers on the tips of chiseled stair, and for a moment every footstep is an act of trespass. The stories are never just in the stones. They live, too, in the steady hands that refuse access, in the locked doors that turn back all but the most compliant. The forbidden is not just subterranean, but social, a fortress built on silence and skepticism alike. Suddenly, the corridor opens into a dim antechamber. Here I pause, taking in the heavy hush, the weight pressing down not just from the ancient limestone above, but from the centuries of academic dogma wrapped like bandages around the truth. The tension in this room could be cut with a flint knife. Some days, it feels as if every shadowed alcove in Giza holds not treasures, but verdicts rendered against the curious, against anyone tempted to rewrite the script. Yet outside, above these hidden spaces, the wind keeps churning the sands, constantly rewriting the plateau's surface. West once suggested the land itself was once a rolling savanna, lush and green, ages before the desert took over. The idea lingers, impossible to prove, yet impossible to fully dismiss. What else might still lie beneath the present, a long buried world, waiting to speak? Every echo of the stone feels like a message from a time when the world's edge was not defined by pyramids, but by rivers and grass. This is the paradox that haunts every would-be challenger here. To press further is to risk not just reputation, but the possibility of vanishing entirely from Egypt's ongoing story. What does it mean to become a ghost in the archives? To have one's work outlasted only by unyielding stone? If there was ever a lost civilization, one capable of feats we do not yet comprehend, it has left more than monuments. It has left a riddle that the keepers of sanctioned history are determined to guard, not only from outsiders, but sometimes even from themselves. My journey is no longer academic. Every footstep echoes with the question of how much silence I am willing to accept. The story of the pyramids, the Sphinx, and their unknowable architects is no longer just about stonework or lost tools. It is a reckoning with who gets to tell the story of the past, and who is sentenced to remain unheard, wandering these corridors of echoing denial. Some nights, I wonder if rewriting the story of Egypt means rewriting the story of ourselves. But as the corridor tightens and the air grows colder, the only true certainty is that these mysteries demand more than obedience. I find myself once more atop the plateau as the sun crests the horizon, its rays illuminating the cool geometry of immovable stone, inviting both reverence and revolt. I find myself once more atop the plateau as the sun crests the horizon, its golden rays sharpening every edge of stone and dust. The air carries last night's chill, and each step onto the Giza plateau feels weighted by the untold centuries buried below my feet. I squint into the morning, the outline of the Great Pyramid dominating the skyline, silent and impassive, holding its mysteries with a kind of stubborn pride. The Giza mystery lingers, not as an answer, but as an ever-deepening riddle. Sand forever shifting around possible truths and forbidden evidence. Walking alone beside the mass of limestone and granite, the cold geometry of the blocks draws my fingertips. The surfaces are unexpectedly slick, almost unnaturally precise. Some blocks are so tightly joined that I can barely slip the edge of a credit card between them. An echo of voices, workers, priests, rulers, seems to hang in the stillness. Yet not a single word is left carved in their memory here. No grand hieroglyphic tribute to Khufu, no parade of triumph or piety. The pyramid, the very monument meant to immortalize its supposed creator, is silent on the subject of its own purpose. I pause and remind myself, not a single decorative inscription glorifying Khufu has ever been found inside the Great Pyramid. I move to the northern face, tracing a thin line of shadow where two blocks misalign by less than a hair's breadth. My boot crushes a ridge of sand, and for a moment I am unsettled by the sense of being watched, not by tourists or guards, but by the distant ghosts of those who built, or perhaps repurposed, this place. A shifting wind brings the faint scent of gypsum and ozone, and I shiver despite myself. The pyramid does not welcome, but it does not repel either. It simply endures, immutable in a world that insists on change. The silence is only broken when I duck into the low, sand-choked entrance cut by earlier explorers. The temperature drops as if I've stepped into a different world. Light filters in at strange angles, splaying against the ancient stone. Here, deeper inside the core, the oppressive silence thickens, becoming almost physical. Alongside the cold, there's a kind of pressure, a weight that presses down, as though the pyramid's secrets are alive and restless, just out of reach. As I move deeper into the dimly lit, sand-swept corridors, I let my hand trace the grooves on the walls. They are too uniform, too strictly measured, to be the careless marks of brute labor. The echo of my footfalls reveals the chamber's hollowness, as if the pyramid is less a solid tomb and more an enigma of empty spaces and unseen passageways. I remember stories of hidden doors, rumors of clandestine rooms mapped by cosmic rays, but denied to all but a select few. The authorities, call them guardians, call them gatekeepers, stand as sentinels, controlling not only access to the stone, but to history itself. Every so often the silence breaks, giving way to a a flashback to that sun-bleached afternoon when I first watched geologist Robert Schoch stride across the base of the Sphinx. The monument's body, misshapen by deep vertical channels, seemed at odds with the delicate pores and proud eroded face. Schoch and John Anthony West knelt beside the stone, brushing their hands into grooves worn smooth by water, not sand. The implications hung in the dry wind. The heavy rainfall needed to carve these channels hasn't touched Giza since around 12,000 years ago. And yet, the Sphinx watches over the Giza plateau as if daring time itself to explain its scars. These breaks in the narrative are like aftershocks. They fracture everything I thought I knew. I take a detour this time, winding into a culvert that seems too precise for mere chance. The darkness intensifies. I press a flashlight to the stone, seeking signs of tool marks. The cuts are sharp, some almost mirror smooth. I picture the hands that did this. Was it a team of 10,000 with copper chisels and ropes? Or was it something more? Was there a mastery here that evades all explanation we're allowed to accept? My pulse accelerates, picking up the cadence of the unsolved. It's impossible to ignore the anachronism. Why would every surface, every joint, be so faultless, yet remain mute on the question of authorship? Mainstream narratives brush aside the contradictions, focusing on what fits. I recall the fate of researchers like Robert Bauval, those daring to challenge the accepted alignments and astronomical connections of the pyramids, only to be stonewalled by institutions unwilling to consider that the truth may run deeper and stranger than sanctioned accounts allow. Here's the pattern, interrupting the dogma. Each solution only deepens the puzzle. Brush away the sand, and another layer of complication emerges. The sound that bounces from the walls is mine alone, and yet I feel as if I am not the first to ask what is missing here, what is being protected. I flash back, just for a second, to the Giza plateau as it might have been. Monsoon rains lashing the limestone, the air thick with mist and fresh growth, workers or initiates treading mud that would one day bake into eternity. Did they see themselves as mere laborers, or as custodians of knowledge that would be concealed, not revealed, by the very structures they built? Another gust of silence follows as I return to the outer causeway, emerging into the daylight, blinking against the harsh Egyptian sun. Sand slides underfoot, grinding against the worn stones. Wind howls through the geometry of the site, tugging at exposed skin and scattering dust into my eyes. In its own way, the landscape conspires to erase what little remains, an ongoing battle between revelation and concealment. I pause atop a half-buried platform, the pyramid looming behind me. The ground carries stories that will outlast empires. Each pyramid, each block, and each unadorned corridor stands as a silent rebuke to the arrogance of certainty. The closer I come to the core, the more I recognize that the guardians of history, whether by design or by inertia, protect more than just the relics. They defend our narrative, our sense of what is possible. Standing here, wind-blown and weary, I realize that my journey into these depths has changed me. The oppressive silence, the patient stone, the shifting sands, all form a tapestry woven by something or someone whose intentions remain frustratingly opaque. It isn't proof or legend that lingers, but the raw possibility that the greatest truths are neither lost nor found. simply overlooked. I turn one final time, the Great Pyramid framed by morning light, its angles too aloof for simplicity. The real legacy of this place is uncertainty, a refusal to be easily known. As sand fills my footprints almost as soon as they appear, I sense that history's safeguard is not denial, but invitation. The invitation is to question, to doubt, and above all, to resist the temptation of easy answers. At the threshold where dust meets sky, the ancient tension still vibrates between secrecy and revelation, between what we are told and what we can prove. In this silence, I hear a promise. The journey is not just mine, and not just now. It is for anyone who dares to step past the well-guarded doors. Anyone willing to listen to the shifting sands and the echoes in the stone, to risk rethinking what it means to be human. This is the conclusion we must all live with. The past awaits, not to close its doors, but to remind us how much we have yet to see.